Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel once again. This is another video on the T4. So in the previous video we got the engine fitted back into the van, we hooked up drive shafts, wiring, fuel lines, all that stuff, and we actually got the engine running as well after messing about with the pump timing a little bit. And I mentioned in that video as well that I needed to change the shaft seal on the pump, and that's because it was leaking from in the back of the pulley here. It was sort of dripping down onto all this stuff here. So that seal is now changed. I've fitted a fresh seal and cleaned all up in there as well. I've got the pulley back on and the van seems to be running okay again. It doesn't seem to be dripping from there. So now I've also fitted a new snazzy braided clutch line there that you can see is going down into the slave cylinder. But what that means is I can now go ahead and fit up the front clip again and start to build up the front end. And then of course once that's back on, we can get the radiator back on and get all of the main coolant hoses back on. Then we can hopefully flush the system and start to fill up the system with fresh coolant as well. And then at that point we should be safe to run the engine right up to temperature and just check that the fans and stuff like that come on as well. So here's my front clip here. I've been sort of refurbishing this one on the side. So yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll get this fitted to the van. So before I go ahead and fit the new radiator, I just want to talk a bit about this setup here. So this is a, in my opinion, slightly over-engineered thing that VW done back in the day. So we've got a mechanical sort of thermostat type thing here. And the idea was that they wanted the engines to get up to temperature quicker. So these fans have all these fins or vanes or whatever you want to call them. And to start with, they're shut. Now, as the engine starts to get up to temperature, and this should start to rise and open up, and as it does that, it actually pulls and moves this mechanism, which is supposed to rotate these round to open up the fins. Now, what happens is there's two failure points. Either this fails, or you get what's happened on mine here, in that these bolts rust, and the plastic sort of bracket here expands and it cracks, and it actually prevents this whole mechanism from turning round and opening up these fins. And the result of that is that these fins are closed the entire time. And what that does is, as you're driving the van, it prevents any airflow coming in into the engine. So your fans will come on, but they're not actually able to draw any air through these fins at all. And I actually think this is why there's so many T4s with overheating issues and getting cylinder heads skimmed and rebuilt and all that stuff. And it's because of this mechanism here has failed, causing the van to overheat. Now, instead of going down the route of replacing at least this fan and also sourcing another sort of triple armed bracket thing, I thought that might get a little bit expensive quite quickly. Now, I actually have a pair of these 11-inch slimline fans. I've had these sit in from a past project, just sort of collecting dust. And they just happen to fit absolutely perfectly into the fan cowling. So I've now actually got these two fans mounted to the cowling in two places. So bolted through there and bolted through here, and then bolted through there and there. If I flip this over, you'll see that the fans fit pretty much perfectly into the fan cowling. So these are 11-inch slimline fans. So essentially I'm going to do away with these big heavy duty fans. I'm going to run these two, and then that should also give me a little bit more space in here to access the side of the block. Now for wiring these in, it's going to be nice and simple. These are just, obviously they've got a positive and a negative. So I can quite simply just chop this wiring off here, and then I will probably open these up and splice in the thicker gauge wiring from the original fans. And then other than making sure the polarity is correct so that they spin the same way as the original fans, everything else should just be plug and play at that point. Okay, so that's the cowling all bolted up to the new radiator now. So as I say, I'm running 11-inch slimline fans now, and I've modified the wiring so that it will take the original plugs, so that it's all plug and play with the original T4 loom. And I've got this little power pack here. So if I just put some power to the fan. So they're nice and quiet, they run nice and smooth. It also means I can safely get rid of the sort of mechanical stat that tends to fail and all those fins and stuff like that. Now they probably don't pull quite as much air as the original ones, but they're still pulling a fair bit, and it'll be more than enough to draw that air right through the radiator to keep the engine cool. So yeah, this is now ready to go back into the van. And then once that's in, I can also finish plumbing up what's left of the power steering system. Okay, so quick update where we're at now. So obviously you've just seen me, I've fitted up the radiator fan pack now as well. Just need to put on this front sort of slam panel, which is currently in paint just there. So I've got all the power steering hoses now fitted and clamped up as well, and the remainder of the coolant hoses are on as well. So the little expansion tank one, and underneath I've got all the main hoses in as well now. So I'm pretty much ready to actually fill it with coolant and run it up to temperature and things, just check there's no leaks and stuff like that. Now I say coolant, but I am actually going to fill this with just water to start with. I'm going to get it right up to temperature, make sure there's no leaks, make sure the thermostat opens and whatnot, make sure the heater and all that's still good. And then I'm actually going to drain it all out, so I'm just going to sort of flush out the system. And then if all that checks out good, then we'll fill it up with some actual good clean coolant. So I've killed the engine because, as you can see, there's a pretty nasty leak coming from the thermostat flange. Yep, so this should be a pretty simple fix. Hopefully I've basically just put the O-ring on the wrong side. So I had it like this on the outside there, thinking it should seal up to the block, whereas actually it should be like this. So it seals against the plastic flange, and then the flange itself of course seals up to the block. So I've cleaned up the block again, ready to refit it this way. folks, so that's it for this video. It's been a pretty successful few days on the van. So we've managed to throw the front end back on and fix the whole cooling fan situation. We've run it right up to temperature. We've fixed any sort of major leaks that sprung from doing that. And we've got our headlights working. And in general, it's just starting to look a bit more like a van now. I've also thrown on a late spec bumper, which I think suits it a bit better. And if you've watched my previous video on refurbishing the gear linkage and refitting that back into the van, you'll know as well it's now changing gear and it's drivable as well. And you'll notice as well it's now sitting in a different workshop to where it was sitting before. And I actually did drive it the short distance into this workshop, so it is a running and driving van now. I've bled the clutch and also the brakes, so we can actually drive it, but what it really needs now is an exhaust. And that's exactly what the next video is going to be about. So I'll give you a sneak preview here. I've got a few bits and bobs, and I'm going to sort of do a bit of fabrication work to piece some of this together to make a nice little side exit exhaust for the van. But you're going to have to wait till the next video to see that. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next video. Take care.